And we're recording. So thank you everybody for joining. I have got back with me tonight Am Adair, as she's professionally known, who is a good friend of mine, an author, a very well, taking over the internet at the moment, author, and former Naval Intelligence, with some fantastic stories to share with you. And every time I kind of get chatting to you, we're always chuckling about all sorts of things. Today we were talking about dogs and their wonderful revenge. So you've got a few extra guests for us.
Oh, absolutely. So right now, and thank you for having me back, Gavin. I love talking to you. So this is just money, but I kind of warned him ahead of time that I have 2 dogs of my own, but then we're also dog sitting, and they're all Goldens of some type. Our dog sitting is a golden doodle. Mine are golden. So they're all Velcro dogs. And I tried to escape to get some privacy to be able to talk to you, and they found me. So right now I'm surrounded, but they're being calm. So if you guys hear strange noises in the background, I swear it's not the bodies. Those ones are much, much better hidden. It's puppy playtime.
So what's changed in your world since the last time we caught up? I mean, I know obviously you've had a lot of things going on in the publishing, which we'll get to in a short while, but everything else, is there lots of excitement going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm still going strong with film school, and I think we talked about that last time, but then one of the things I added on to that was, all my professors kept saying, get on set, get on set, get on set, get experience. And one of the things before I joined the military, I was a theater major at Ohio State University, or the Ohio State University. I'm not sure when they got so pretentious, but they did. And, of course, my parents were thrilled with the idea that I wanted to be an actor. They were so, so thrilled with that career choice. But it was something that was fun and I was passionate about. Then 9/11 happened and everything changed. But as you know, I found myself in the intel world. And then when I started doing, the counterintelligence and human intelligence side of the house, those acting skills and those, the ability to convey sincere and convincing emotions and, lie convincingly, became very, very good skills to have. And, where I didn't end up making films or getting on the stage like I had anticipated as a child, strangely enough, acting became a part of my life. It was just, I guess you could call it improv.
Yeah.
And improv in the very real sense. So now it's kind of coming full circle. I'm trying to explore screenwriting, and to be a better screenwriter, I want to see how it works. So I got with a company that helps, beginning actors build an actor reel. And so they sent me 3 scenes. They're just 1 page. And all it is dialogue. It's just 2 people in just dialogue. There's no action lines. There's no context, nothing. It's just, this is it. And okay, this is where, all of our implicit and explicit bias and our experiences really come to play. It's almost like a Rorschach. You read this page, and I saw, especially for the one that was supposed to be the military thriller, I read it differently than the actor that they had to play opposite me read it. So when we're getting there, starting to rehearse, we both had 2 totally different interpretations of how this should go. Yeah. You might not be surprised to know that the other one, my co-actor, was a civilian, never been in the military. So
Yep.
Very, very different ideas of how this should play out. And then the director came in, and the director's like, oh, this is how I want to do it. I'm like, well, okay, well, there's a third option. Okay. So, but that gave me a whole lot of insight into how important it is for a screenwriter to make sure that you're capturing the nuances that you need to convey, but then you're still leaving latitude for the actors and the directors to be creative and express themselves in their way. Because it's a collaborative art form.
Yeah.
But it's so wild how, the same sentence could be read so many different ways and interpreted so many different ways.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Hell, it's amazing. Anybody agrees on set.
Yeah, I actually saw that scene and it was brilliant. And there was that line, something along the lines of "You've outranked me for 30 seconds" or something like that, or for 2 minutes or whatever it was. And now that you've told me that it was a civilian playing it, like, I'm just thinking to myself, "Oh, that must have been a challenge."
Well, here's my next confession. So they gave me the scenes so I could rehearse, and they gave me the option to request edits. And instead of requesting an edit, I just did it myself. And I didn't want to insult the screenwriter, because they have a great job, and I'm sure it's very challenging to come up with this stuff on the fly. But the only one I edited was the military thriller one, because originally what they wrote, I was like, oh yeah, this would never, never happen. This is not how any of this would go. So then I just rewrote it. That was one of the lines I rewrote. And just kind of sent it back to him. It's like, well, what do you think? You're like, no, this is perfect. Let's go with it. And I was like, okay. It's like I tried to keep as much of what he wrote, because I didn't want it to I didn't want it to be my work or my things that I was trying to do. I really wanted to see what the experience is of being handed something and said, now go. Yeah. But I just couldn't stomach what he originally wrote. I was like, it's like, I can't read this. This is not right.
I would love to see the original script some point.
I'll send it to you. It's just, it's melodramatic. The ranks are wrong. I'm just,
oh dear.
Whoa, no wonder there's so many movies we get where there's military or intelligence involved, and everybody just starts cringing. Like,
yeah, and it's amazing the perception from the outside world as well.
Yep.
And kind of you've probably seen the pictures and posts floating around that says terms like military grade impress everybody except those who've been in the military. Yeah. And the words military, whenever I see the words military precision, for everybody else in the world, they're like, well, wow, and for me I'm like, oh.
Yeah. It's like the Princess Bride line is like, I don't think that word means what you think it means.
yeah, I like that one. So, oh well.
But it was good. It was all good. And, it again, full circle. I wanted to be an actor. I got a whole lot of experience in improv, and now I'm kind of coming back to it. But in this case, my intent isn't to be an actor. My intent is to be a better screenwriter. Acting's fun, and I would not say no to just having fun with it. But I have zero desire to be in that spotlight ever again. I'm not even sure how I ever thought I would want it as a kid, but now it's just like,
no, you've decided to go against the idea of being on the Hollywood Walk of Fame then.
Yeah. Well, doing stuff like this is hard enough. I was like, just even posting on social media. It's like I break out into like a cold sweat every time I have to post something.
Oh yeah.
Some habits just die hard, and that one's probably pretty firmly ingrained.
Yeah, this for me has been a whole new world over the last few years of kind of going from working with pretty much zero online presence to then go right now you've got, and it goes from posting and pictures and then videos and interviews and all sorts of things, and you go from like being in the shadows to thrust in the limelight, and it becomes a funny world.
It's hard. As George R.R. Martin said something that this is kind of my guiding light, is like, he said to wish for success and not for fame. And I completely agree.
Oh, yeah.
I want to be successful. And I understand that this is part of that metric. It's something, you have to do these things because you have to be accessible to your audience. They have to be able to see you to become interested in you. Mm-hmm. I understand how it works. It doesn't mean I have to like it.
Yeah, there is that. So I actually had a very similar conversation with somebody the other day because of the lines of work I've done, looking after all manner of different people. He owns a close protection company, and I did some training for him, and I've done some close protection work for him and that kind of thing. And I was explaining to somebody else, a friend of mine, I can't stand the kind of celebrity work, the A-list celebrities, when I turn it down. They'll call me up, can you look after so-and-so? No. and he knows this, the CEO of the company. We have a laugh about it all the time. He says, basically, I know you're going to say no every time I ring you to ask you, but I have to go through the phone book, and because you're guaranteed to get mobbed every time you go out. If you're with the celebrity, everywhere you go, it's gonna be, give me a Chinese businessman, billionaire who nobody knows. It's just two blokes walking with a suit, and I'll take that all day long. But give me somebody, off the television, and I'm like, oh, do I have to?
Exactly. And I get it. There are people who thrive in that world. There are, extroverted people who like this, they feed off of this. And it is something that kind of comes with the territory. You never really think about it when you just want to be a storyteller, the other side of things, like what happens when your stories really pick up steam and become something bigger. I think in a lot of cases, we're not really prepared for the reality of it. But, after a couple decades of being the gray man, being in the shadows, it's incredibly disconcerting and uncomfortable to suddenly be like, well, put yourself out there. I'm like, do I have to? Can I just go be a hermit somewhere? Just
I know. And you got so many authors right under a pen name. And I think to myself, well, why? It's kind of. I mean, you can understand it in our industry, and some of the military guys who they want to cover their identity. That's fair enough. But unless you're like kind of, I don't know, Stephen King or James Patterson or J.K. Rowling, the chances are you're not going to get spotted in Publix or Quickie Mart or wherever else are kind of doing your shopping. In fact, I don't know, I might have mentioned to you before, but did you know that thing with James Patterson when he was on the airplane? Yeah. I mean, so even he can get mistaken.
I think authors are probably fortunate in the fact that you can have success, and a lot of times most people don't flip to the back cover and really look at the author's picture, or if you do, it's something that maybe taken 10 years ago. So it's very easy for you to maintain a somewhat level of anonymity. But you also notice that none of my books have my picture in it, and that is by intent. But at the same time,
I did.
Everybody asks you for it, and the first time they asked me for it, I kind of did one of those. I just gave it to them, like, yeah, okay, whatever you need here. But then I was like, do we really have to use it? But the reason I went with Am Adair instead of using my name, which is Ama, really was because of the genre we're writing in. It wasn't so much a pen name to obfuscate who I am. It was more because it is such a male-dominated genre. I didn't want people to arbitrarily go, a chick wrote that, it's not going to be that good. And I know that sounds terrible, but it's true. A lot of people do judge a book by its cover, and the idea of a woman writing thrillers, especially action-heavy thrillers, is kind of an outlier. Let's say there's a ton of us, but once upon a time there wasn't.
I know, and of course, I mean, when I first got into the intelligence industry, and like kind of even back then, it's always been like a hugely male-dominated kind of area, and I could see an increase of female operatives and female staffers all over the place, to the point where, I mean, now I think MI6, I think probably close to 50% of the intelligence officers at MI6 are female. And this is not because of, well, the thing is, this is not because of things like DEI hires or diversity or anything like that. It's down to the fact that they can do things that men can't.
Yes.
And it's taken a long time, probably too long, to realize that. But I really think it's a great thing that, they're not hiring them and trying to get them to do what men can do. They're hiring them to get them to do what men can't do. And that's more important.
Agreed. And, that kind of partnership makes it, almost unstoppable. So you get, like, everybody knows, you see two dudes wearing suits with military haircuts sitting in a sedan somewhere, like, oh yeah, there's the feds. You see that a mile away. Even if you get a couple of operatives walking together trying to blend in, you got two dudes walking around. They stand out. But you get a woman or even two women walking around, they practically disappear. And I get it. It's like all government, all big machines, let's say, we're just a cog in that overall picture, and it takes a long time for the things to change. So even if you show that, like, here, all the after actions, all the lessons learned, everything says this is the go, we need this, the systems are always hard to change because the paradigms are so ingrained, and we love our status quo. And change is scary. So it takes years of just relentless pursuit to get somebody to go, okay, it's just time to shift the way we do business.
And of course, this is pretty much every government branch. I mean, this is both in the US and the UK. I mean, we've both worked together, especially on intelligence operations many times in the past. And we're we're at the point now where kind of they're finally slowly starting to catch up and realize, because generally most of the time we praise ourselves on being so far ahead, and we're the MI6 or we're the CIA or and yet with all other areas and aspects, they're generally about 10 to 20 years behind.
Yeah, and that's the way it is. Sorry, I muted myself because I got the doggy WWE going, so I was trying to spare you that in the background. But it was like, and I saw it happening. I had a very privileged position of being the first woman to go through the Marines Air Ground Task Force CI HUMIT course. The only reason I got to do that was because I was Navy and not a Marine, because the Marines had their policy about women on the front lines, and that MOS meant you were going to be on the front lines, which automatically excluded women. But I was a sailor, so I did not. That was the loophole. That's how I got in.
Oh,
and
wow.
The idea was that they took 3 Navy people who were already instructor qualified. They were going to send them out, so you were going to get experience, and they were going to come back and teach as like a combined cadre. And that is how I got started in doing, HUMIT. And it was literally an email went out that said, "HUMIT, anyone?" And there was like 2 sentences in it. And I was just like, okay, I'm curious. And I responded to it. And that's what started everything. There was nothing when I got started. There was no framework. It didn't exist because Navy didn't do it. And the Marines didn't know how to deal with the Navy, let alone deal with a chick. So it was building it as we were going and testing the waters, screwing up, but that's how we learned our TTPs. That's how we evolved. But I had that unique position of being the person who literally saw it from start into what it became by the time I retired. And, when I retired, there were so many kids who were doing the job or were so much better than I ever was. But it kind of felt like the Grinch. My heart grew 3 sizes that day. I was like, oh, look how awesome this is. So even the cynic that I had become, over the years was still so happy with how far we come. But I had that privilege of seeing all the steps along the way, like literally going from nothing, like less than nothing. Like you are not even an entity, a bump on the radar, to when I left, we were having requests for, people to fill billets that we just didn't have bodies for. It's like the demand was far outpacing the throughput of the schoolhouse, which is good and bad. But it went from being the Navy doesn't need that, you're going to die out, this is just a trend, a fad, and you should be on a ship, to, oh my God, we need more of you, we need you everywhere, we need you on all the staffs, and why don't you have more of these people? Stop fighting us.
Oh no, yeah, and this is the problem, especially with a lot of when you, the red tape that you were talking about there with the Marines, and that kind of thing, where you look at the fact that you were lucky enough to get through because of that loophole with you being Navy. Look how many people have missed out, and how much opportunity that the military itself has missed out on just because of a sentence on a piece of paper somewhere.
I agree, and it usually. And I understand it kind of goes back to, that change is hard. And if you already have policies in place, then people are like, well, we already have the policy, let's stick with the policy. If you don't evolve your policies with the changing battlefield and the changing environment, then you're literally setting yourself up for failure. So it took years for us to break through those kind of, issues. And a lot of those were very hard fought, but they were also very worthwhile. And I think I was fortunate again, because I was always one of those people that I never cared about my career. I know that sounds really weird, but going through, making rank, I am still convinced to this day, the only reason I made chief was because I spent so much time deployed. I volunteered back to back to keep going and deployed. I was, global war on terrorism was high, and I was in it. And if it hadn't been for that, I probably wouldn't have made chief as quickly as I did, and then eventually put on warrant officer. But I never cared about making chief, and I never cared about making senior chief or master chief. It was about doing the job. So it made it very easy for me to make decisions that were based on what I needed to do for the job instead of what I needed to do to make rank.
That makes sense, actually,
which made it perfect when I became a warrant officer, because then it was like I can go and give everybody the finger and be like, nope, this is the way we're going to do it, and there was nothing anybody could do to me.
And that goes along with a lot of the ethos of what I try to explain to people when you see people and I don't know, say for instance, they look at their figure and they say, oh, yeah, I want a body like that. How do I get a body like that? And you say, well, what you do, you go to the gym. And they go, well, how long before I get a body like that? And you say, look, you're looking at it wrong. Instead of looking at that being a target that you need to hit, because if that's all you do is hit that target, then you're just going to lose it again. Don't fall in love with the outcome. Fall in love with the going to the gym. Just go to the gym and do what you have to do, and that will come naturally. And if you carry on going to the gym and love going to the gym, you'll keep it, But and that's very much like everything I've done in my career. A lot of the time, I wasn't. I actually got asked this question. It surprised me not so long back. They said, how is it you manage to do so many things in advance so much? And and I said the thing is, I said I didn't realize I was good at something most of the time until after I stopped doing it and been moved up to something else. And it was like, I'd go up to something and they go, look, you're really, really good at that. Do you want to try this? And I go, am I? Okay, then yeah, okay, I'll try that. And then I'll try that. And then I'd do that for a while and I'd get stuck in and do the job. And then after a while they go, you're really, really good at that. Do you want to try this as well? And I go, really? I'm good at this too. And with each step up the ladder, I surprised myself because like you, I was just doing my job, and then like after so long of doing it, people were saying, "Oh, you're really, really good." Oh, thank you. And then they'd move me from that to somebody else, which and eventually it led to the point where towards the end they said, "Look, you were really good at pretty much everything. Do you want to train people?" I'm like, "Was I?" Oh, okay. Yeah, why not? I'll give that a shot.
Isn't that the way it always works? Like, man, you are so good at what you do. Now we're going to yank you out and you're going to go do something else. Like,
yeah.
But I completely understand what you're saying. It was never really, I never really thought of myself as being really good at what I did. I knew I could do it and I knew what I was talking about. But it really wasn't until after the fact, when people are like, oh, you were so great at this. I'm like, you obviously didn't see how many times I screwed up, but thank you. But then at the same time, it was, I guess it made it so that I would walk into something and then it wasn't about, okay, I know I'm good at this. It was more of a, I'm not going to fail at this. So it was more of a, okay, here's the next challenge.
That's it.
Here we go.
Exactly the same. That was what I was like with pretty much everything that was thrown onto my plate, as it were. I just looked at it and thought, right, it doesn't matter what's going to happen. What I have to put myself through to get this done, I'm going to get the job done, and that would be it. And at the end of it all, when the job was done, I had that on my side, and then the other string to my bow was the fact that I pretty much said yes to everything. I was that stupid.
I completely understand that. Like, as I got older, I started learning, how to say no at the correct moments. But, I also get that when you're trying to make something happen, you want to build a rapport, you want to have goodwill, you want to give yourself the decision space and the latitude to move where you need to when you want it. So you do find yourself, saying yes more and more and more. So that way, when you need to call in some chips, those people are more than likely to. Like, hey, yeah, you're right. You came through for me.
Well, I asked somebody not so long back who got an outstanding military career, and I said, what do you reckon was the most valuable skill you learned? He said, how to say a tactical no.
That's awesome. I might have to use that one. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So I wish I'd have thought of that myself.
I like it.
So yeah, I mean, so if anybody is like kind of looking at you now, going, "Wow, look at what you've done, look at how far you've come. I'd love to do that. I'd love to be just like you." What advice would you give them if they were like about to start off?
So the best advice I can give to anybody is to run your own race. Do not compare yourself to anybody else. I know the squeaky toy in the background is making this so much better, but I think, especially in the intel world, if you try to pigeonhole yourself saying, I'm going to do it like they did, then you miss the opportunity to be the next innovator, to be the next person who's going to open a door that we couldn't open before or find another avenue. And that, I think, is more crucial than anything else in the intel world. It's like the drive to get the mission done is probably what you want to cultivate above everything else, and not so much this person's who I want to emulate. Be your own version, but then look at the problem set with your eyes and your talents and your skill sets, because that's what is truly unique and will give us something different to work with.
Yeah, Yeah, I like that, and it's the whole kind of uh I see somebody said to me, what is the best quality? What can I do, to kind of improve my chances in working in intelligence? She was on the phone to me a while ago. And I said, in all honesty, a lot of the time, like the number one skill, I mean, there are all the obvious things like having a second language or having a degree, which are all the obvious things. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is to be able to be coachable, dynamic, and look at everything with an attitude of, I'm going to make this happen. And that to me is, that attitude is everything in my opinion.
I agree. It's like, and I think everybody who goes through, starts down the intel world, they have these lofty ideals about how it's going to be, but it comes down to knowing yourself and knowing what you bring to the table. It's like nobody wants you to put up a facade. Nobody wants you to pretend like you're Jason Bourne or James Bond and or go diving into the bushes saying I can be the best, surveillance guy on the planet. They want what's unique about you because that's going to be what matters. You could, just by natural happenstance, fill a critical need. But if you're trying too hard to act like somebody else or to play to strengths that you don't have, then you're missing out on what you could actually bring to the table. And it's like, we eventually got to this point. But like I said, when I got started, there was no screening. But we started screening people for suitability because some people have it and some people don't. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a hit on anybody, but there is a certain level of natural ability and aptitude that goes in when you're going to be, an actual intelligence operator, somebody who's going to go out in the field and going to actually interact with people.
Yeah.
And, that was probably the biggest thing I always told anybody when they asked me for advice was, be yourself. Obviously, be a polished version of yourself and know what you're getting into, but don't try to play to the crowd, because guess what? They know you're playing to the crowd and they're not going to like it.
Yeah, exactly. And you as well as utilizing the strengths that you do have. I mean, I remember doing selection with the British Army for the reserves, and I remember I'm not good at running. I've never been good at running. That's my big weak spot. Do all the other stuff. I could do all the pull-ups, all the push-ups, all the other bit, but the running part, it was my weakest area. And you had to do a mile and a half in. I wish it was less than 2 weeks, but unfortunately, it was less than 12 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that. Way before Uber, so there was no out for me. And
what were they thinking?
I know, dreadful. And because they said, you got to run. I'm like, really? I've been driving since I was 10. I don't. And I didn't really like the idea of it, but I had to do it. And I remember there was probably 50 to 60 candidates at the time. You do it. I think we did about a half a mile or thereabouts, or a 3/4 mile kind of warm up, and then when you on the I think it's the second lap that they start you off, you take a tag, away you go, and your mile and a half starts, and you got to do it. I think it was less than 10 minutes or something along those lines. And so I remember at the time, as much as I hated it, I had one thing in my mind, and that was, I'm not going to be at the back. I don't care about being at the front, but I'm not going to be at the back. And that was it. But once I'd done that, what I found over time, the more active I become and the more things I was doing, the running did, I'm not going to say it got easier, but it didn't. It wasn't.
You find ways to make it suck.
Yeah, it was manageable. So
I'm right there with you. Running has never been my thing.
But I stopped caring because I had other areas that I was doing really well at, and other areas that I was shining. So for me, that was I got all the other boxes ticked, so I was happy.
There you go. And it is about individuality. It's like nobody wants to be a carbon cutter version of somebody else in the intel world, because then you end up making like the same decisions and doing the same things, and that's not how you make ground. That's not how you get new things, and that's not how you evolve the intelligence picture. You need new insights, new backgrounds, new experiences, new viewpoints, and I think people too often take that for granted. And they look for that, wow, this is a stellar individual. They hit all the right boxes. Like, and great, they're stellar. What else
Yeah.
do they bring to the table?
That's it. What else have they got? And I love that the way you say carbon copy, because there was a case a few years ago with the FBI trying to they were trying to entrap somebody involved in the world of organized crime. And I've got to be really, really careful because I've never told this story before. But they were using a particular female as kind of a honey trap to kind of get a little bit close to this individual. And it was the third attempt, and he'd kind of caught two out and sent them packing. And it was the third attempt, and basically, apparently he knew from the beginning, but let her hang on a little bit longer before he finally sent the message back and said, "Look, you keep trying this. Let me tell you now, the first two were rejected, and I thought you'd have had the sense to have not sent the third one with the exact same script." It's like everything was identical. The bump, and you know, like there were carbon copies of every single kind of, you know, this is what got her in this bit and got through the door at that bit, and 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 it just led to disaster. And whether they caught him in the end or whatever, I don't know. But I just remember hearing that story of, you know, even though the third agent who was sent in undercover got a lot further, apparently he knew from the very beginning. He was actually humouring her for a long time until eventually he said, "Look, just, you know, go back to the station, send this message."
Wow. I get it. You know, there's the tried and true and stuff that always seems to work for one reason or another. The honey trap. I mean, the reason we keep using them because they work.
Yep.
But at the same time, how did nobody see that? How did nobody go, you know what? This is the exact same thing on the same person. I mean, what are the chances that they're either that stubborn or, you know, that stupid?
It's a typical government kind of attitude of they will look at something like, you know, all right, his favorite color is red, so wear a red dress. Yeah, they'll look at all the different things. This is where he eats, and this is how we got this far with the last person. So they'll copy everything right up to the bit where it went wrong. And then they'll say, right, this is where they were caught out. So this is the bit where you just need to do something different. But when you've had three ladies in three red dresses, who've all been three blondes, who've all got Gucci handbags, who've all got Louboutin shoes, and in the same restaurant in 3 months, it's like, kind of, really? Come on, guys.
Like they're like, well, it worked in the choose your own adventure books. You know, if I died, okay, go back to page 49. I'm like, okay, check the other choice now. It's like,
yeah.
Forgot.
So, but I mean, I might have been like over exaggerating there with the whole, you know, but the bottom line is it's a government thing to look at what seemed to work up until it went wrong, and then just cross that last thing off, back one step, and you know, instead of saying, hang on, did we get this wrong from the very beginning? And what are the chances of these three identical females being sent on along the same path? And, you know, is it going to stand out too much? They're just looking at the last step where it went wrong instead of the whole process.
I think that actually might be the heart of why there's always kind of this little headbutting between, let's say, like admin operations and the guys who are actually intelligence collectors, is because they're, you know, some people need, like, here's my checks and balances. I need a list. This is a procedure. This is how everything works. They're the ones who follow directions implicitly. And then there are the other people who, like, here's your left and right lateral limits and play in here. And that's the world that we thrive in, and does not compute to these people. And then for us, it's like, yeah, I can follow your checklist, but wake me up when we're done. And it takes a different type. But because of that, we have this fundamental battle between the two, where the people like the money managers, the policy makers, you know, the bean counters are like, no, you have to do it like this because this is where we've shown proven success before. And everybody who's not thinking in black and white terms is going, yeah, but it's not going to keep working like that. And I think that goes with anything that has any kind of creativity about it. It's probably why so many of us end up in the creative arts, is because it takes creativity to think about how you're going to approach another human being, or how you're going to answer this puzzle of the intelligence picture. And that translates to, you know, writing books, you know, movies, you know, creating new programs and things like that. It's like all of innovation and discovery comes from creativity.
Yeah, and I got to admit, I have been very much like that in a lot of my career. When I've had to get on the comms and say, yeah, it's all gone wrong. Then they go, well, did you do everything on the list? I'm like, there's a list. What? And they go, okay, got a plan B. I'm like, there's a plan B. Were you not paying attention to anything? I just thought I'd go out here and swing it,
Fly by the seat of my pants. This is how we make things happen.
So, but that's how things generally get done. And all right, things go wrong from time to time, but usually I've found that if you stick to the list, like to the letter, we're back to this third red dress scenario where they wonder why officers get caught and undercover agents get caught and people get caught, and you go, well, if you are producing carbon copies each time and sticking to the same list and the same plan and the same backstories and aging every time you do this, then that's why they're going to get caught. If they've got caught once, word gets around. Word travels faster amongst criminals in the underworld than what it does amongst the intelligence community and the government. That's for sure.
Yeah, you can't take people out of the equation. If there's people involved, you got to take people into account, and there's so many variables at play there. I mean, granted, there's some broad things that are kind of people will be people, but again, it's like you expect people to be idiots just because it worked once in this situation doesn't mean it's going to work in all situations. And
Exactly.
you got to add in the other factors. What are these individuals' background? What has happened before? What have we tried? How far have we worked? Anybody looking at that like rationally, like taking the step back and holistically looking, what have we done, would go, okay, this is stupid. But again, too many people treat it as if you're, tuning up an engine where it's just like the same processes every single time. And you can't treat a human being that way.
And this is it. It's good for if you think that way and you're an engineer and you're building a bridge, then fantastic. But if you, like you say, if you're dealing with humans, you have to be so dynamic. And this is why a lot of the times, I've gone wandering into things like kind of, ask first and people say, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'll play it by ear. And they go, well, we'll figure it out as we go. And and 9 times out of 10, I get better results kind of landing myself in the middle of it, and it's a sink or swim situation, than if I do go in. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's always things that are planned, like exfils, and there's always a safety factor that we've looked at and looked into, that side of it, all the boxes are ticked. That's a completely different thing to like kind of what I'm on about here. But yeah, so your exfils and your emergency routes and knowing where the embassy is or whatever the case may be, anything like that, that's all kind of taken care of. It's not all gung ho with everything, but yeah, it's certainly completely the opposite. Probably how a lot of the top brass probably think it's going to go one way, and we're like, no, it's not.
Which is exactly why they freak out about it, and they're like, that's why anytime there's budget cuts, people are like, well, what does Intel really do for us? Like, here we go. Time to fight. But yeah, and I think that's what it is because they look at it as like, well, you guys are just, you never plan, you never do anything, you're all cowboys. Like, no. And so your SOPs are a plan to deviate from. Semper Gumby, man. It's like you got to flex with whatever the situation is showing you, and there is nothing more dynamic, maybe a gunfight, than an interaction with another human being. It's like it could go 50 million different directions, and you need to be able to flex, and you can't put that down on paper and expect good results.
And going back to what you said earlier about improv, it's like the perfect mirrored world. And because my daughter, 11 years old, bless her, she asked me what improv was not so long back. And I tried to explain it to her, and she didn't quite get it. And I said, right. I said, I tell you what, you just say the next line. And she said, what? I said, look, I'll say something and you respond. And I said something, I can't remember what it was. Like, I'm thinking of buying a pet hedgehog. And she just went, yeah, okay. And I'm like, that's not how this works. She said, well, I said the next line. I'm like, so I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll be both people. And I had to literally stand one way, then turn the other, and I had to play 2 parts. And she was crying with laughter with me, like kind of doing this 2 people play where I was both the people in the play and doing both the lines. And she was like just in stitches. And I said, there you go, that's improv. And if you're good in the world of intelligence, then you should be pretty damn good at improv. And if you're good in the world of improv, then it stands a good job. You make a good undercover officer as well. Probably,
or at least you're going to tell some really great jokes.
Well, there is that, yeah. So, so right, what I'm going to do, because your kind of career as an author is you, instead of turning around and saying to yourself, right, I'm going to put myself in the bracket, I'm going to write action thrillers. You've turned around and said, right, I'm going to do this, that, and have a little bit of a go at everything. And I haven't tried that, so put some of that on my plate as well.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. It's like, let's throw some C in there just for fun.
Oh, so you've been having a lot of fun with with all manner of areas. I have actually got here. Remember when you emailed me this? All print and bound. So this is the original unedited version. And
now it's turned into this.
Oh wow! Look at that.
It's like of course the screen's trying to.
Yep. So if you don't mind, can I read the first 3 words?
Absolutely.
Is it still the same?
Oh, trying to think, what version did I give you? I think it's the same.
I remember opening this to the very first page, and I sat on my sofa over there, and I looked, and I went, right, and I started reading it with the intentions of thinking to myself, well, I'll read a little bit and I'll have some dinner. And then at 4 a.m, I finished it, and I never had my dinner. So I'm going to read the first 3 words, which are, where am I? And that was it. Yep. That was what started me off, and I thought, ooh, this looks good. And it just kept getting better all the way through. And I sat there and I read it in one sitting from start to finish. I couldn't put it down, and I absolutely loved it. It was that good. And I remember you at the time, you were a little bit apprehensive of where it could go. And I said, no, I've got so much faith in this. I promise you, just it'll do well. I know it will. So yeah, just looking now at how far it's come. I'm going to go, nearly, I told you.
Well, I'm hoping I'm going to get a little bit of the last laugh there, because I also told you that I was going to turn it into a screenplay. That's how all this kind of came to be. Is this was an idea that I fleshed out in film school of all places.
Wow.
And lo and behold, I have turned it into a screenplay. And where you told me, you're like, I don't really think this would be a good movie. I'm like, ha ha ha. Challenge accepted. But it's still just my first draft, but on a whim I entered it in the final draft big break screenwriters contest. But I did it because they gave you the option of getting feedback from one of their industry professionals who actually would give you some analysis on it. And when I saw that, I was like, oh well, even if this doesn't go anywhere, this is worth getting somebody who's in the industry to read it and go, okay, here's what we think. And so I did it, and I got my feedback, and it was very positive. So,
okay. Well, I deserve that. I will. I'm going to jump to my defense, and I will say that the reason being a lot of this in the book is the protagonist's thoughts, which is very, very difficult to portray. And in my mind, maybe I'm just not cut out for writing screenplays. I don't know. But I thought, how hard is it going to be able to play the part of somebody who's in fear, but trying to look like they're not scared, and to kind of act that. It's different when you're reading it. When you've got a character who says, he or she walked down the corridor like they didn't care, not letting anybody have an inclination that they were scared, but deep down they were absolutely kind of terrified. So to be able to read it, you can know these things and the thoughts of the protagonist, but to be able to put that into a screenplay, that is just such a difficult task, So
I agree. It did take some time. So, and I fully admit there's parts of it that are going to be different than the way it plays out in the book. And that's okay though, because there's some things like you were just saying, you can't capture somebody's internal thoughts. So internal thoughts, they're just not going to show up on the screen, but you can make sure you still get like the key things. Like, you're talking about, you can't show that somebody's scared. Well, you can show them looking very confident down the hall, but then the camera pans and their hands are shaking, or, you can see their leg trembling as they're sitting at a table while they're acting all tough. There's ways of doing it. It just takes a little bit of, a lot of thought and creativity to try to figure out how to make that work. And I'm not saying I've been entirely successful, but I am saying that I've got something pretty great so far. And if it continues on in the competition, which I'll find out if it makes it past the first round on the August 23rd, that'll be validation that, okay, I'm on to something here. one way or the other, I plan on I'm going to develop it further because, again, started with film school and I'm not done with film school yet. Sneaking suspicion that my script is going to need to come back and get polished, and everything is part of an assignment. So what better opportunity to take the feedback I got from this contest than to work it back into my assignment?
Exactly.
So I'm kind of using that as we go, but it's also, I think it's making me a better writer. So the way this all happened was I had the idea. It's very twisted, of course. I wanted to tell a story as like a first person serial killer. As like, it's like, of course, everyone's like, ooh, serial killer. Yes. Because we're all a little twisted and we're a little dark and we like watching these things.
Yep.
But then I was talking to another colleague of ours, Josh Hood, and he was like, well, the problem with that is how do you make your protagonist likable? I'm like, well, shit, how do you make a serial killer likable?
Yeah, I think the closest, most difficult one, when you said about like kind of you can't hear their thoughts, straight away Dexter come to mind. And I thought that's the only time that you can hear the thoughts and you've got a kind of likable, lovable serial killer. But other than that, what a challenge.
It is. And so, I kind of came up with some ideas to work through it, and I don't want to give everything away for the book, but then I shelved it. And it's like, because of film school, I was putting out my 4th L.A. Anderson. I had a lot of other things going on. And then film school came back around and said, okay, time for you to come up with your feature film idea. I was like, well, I had that one. So I got it down and dusted it off. And that class it made me outline. It's like, oh. It's like, as a pantser, that was a panic mode. Like, oh God, I got to write an outline. Oh no. But it ended up being the best thing for me. Of course, it's a movie outline, doing it in beats, which is totally different than a book outline. And I think maybe that helped me get past my aversion to outlining. But then once I had my outline, I'm like, I really love this story and I'm not ready to let go of it yet. But then my classes switched over to doing TV stuff. Great. Don't get me wrong. Love it. But I couldn't get the story out of my head. So then I just started writing, and that's what became the novella. I took my movie outline and turned it into a novella. And then I went back in class and started writing out the script as part of my class. So it was just kind of this thing that was like all kind of working itself around through the whole process. It's been fun.
And again, because I remember like when I did say that, I think it was a struggle. You wouldn't have the same kind of effect getting it to screenplay, and I don't think it'd make a very good screenplay. I truly mean this. I really hope you prove me wrong, and knowing you will, because you
like a challenge.
Yeah, it's like the minute there's a challenge. If somebody said to you, kind of, oh, this is really hard to do, you'd be like, okay, but I bet you can't do it. You're like, yeah, watch me.
You actually just hit it right there. It's like, if somebody, like knowing me, somebody who knows me, be like, yeah, that's probably not your strong suit. I'm like, yeah, you're right. But if somebody just looks at me and goes, yeah, you can't do that, I'm like,
yeah, that's it. Time for the red cape.
Make this happen.
So and for anybody, so it's about to be released, but it's open for pre-order at the moment, isn't it? Is that right? Have I got that right? Yeah.
Silverback's doing so much cool stuff. It's like, I love the idea of being able that they're taking stories that wouldn't get published anywhere else, or stories that authors have that don't fit into their series, and now they need a home. There's great stories that aren't full novel length, but then that premium package that they do, you get an e-arc, so you get early look at the book, kind of like you did, cheater. But then, you had a chance to pick the cover. You get a chance to have your name in the book. You're in a drawing to win a whole bunch of swag, including like $100 to an indie bookstore. Like, who doesn't want more books? And
exactly.
And then there's going to be behind the scenes content, and there's going to be a chance to do a Zoom with me and ask any question you want. I'm not saying I'll answer all the questions.
Yeah,
you can ask them. But I mean, who else does that? Like, kind of having that interactive experience with an author as they're launching a book.
Yeah, there's not many people doing anything close to that at the moment, is it?
Yeah, and then you get a limited edition, signed and numbered hard copy of it. So I was like, this is awesome. I love this.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that publishers need to be doing now to compete against. I mean, a lot of authors now, they're looking at how much hard work it is to go through the process of publishing, and then the problems that can come afterwards. I mean, there's that many horror stories at with people that are kind of they end up in debt to the publisher, or they end up not owning the rights to characters, and they can't write about their own characters. And when they decide to go a different route, they don't own this, that anymore. So whereas if you self-publish, which has a lot more appeal, because let's face it, a lot of the time you have to do all your own hard work and marketing anyway, whether you self-publish or traditionally publish. More and more authors are going down the route of self-publishing. So yeah, in order to, like I say, compete and bring something to the market, you know, Silverback sounds like they've got the right idea. So for everyone watching, we're closing, getting closer to the end now, coming up to the top of the hour. Where can people find you and Silverback? Where's the best place for kind of people to be able to get a copy of Origin Story? Because it's just, I recommend it to everybody.
It's like, yeah, Origin Story. It is dark. There's a warning for everybody. It is a psychological thriller. It is quite dark, and so brace for shock. But you can get it my website, amadair.com. It has links to all my social, plus it has the links to pre-order Origin Story. And then once it goes live on 22 October 2024, it will also be available on my website. Plus, you can also go to Silverback Publishing, and you can do the premium pre-order package there. You can order through them. You can get their other novellas, which are pretty slick, as well. And you know, it's supporting a really cool new initiative in the publishing world. It's like, it's a bunch of guys who saw a niche that wasn't being filled and decided, you know what, let's give it a shot. And you know, a bunch of those guys, you know, from Best Thriller Books, and you know, a couple of the authors, Terrence McCauley and Steve Stratton. I mean, they're great dudes who are really trying to do something cool and bring in something new to the world of publishing.
Definitely. So before you go, thank you once again. It's always a pleasure talking to you and the dogs.
Sorry about the dogs. It's like, yeah, you know, Goldens really are Velcro puppies. They will find you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and best of luck with it. I'm hoping when it gets out on the big screen, you will come back and tell us all about the process and how it goes.
Oh, absolutely. You'll be the first to know. Once it gets optioned, I'm messaging you. Actually, if you want, I will send you the script so you can give me your 2 cents.
Oh yes, yeah. If you've got enough faith in that, in fact, I'll tell you what. I want to see it before it airs. How about that?
Perfect.
Brilliant. Well then, thank you everybody for joining us, and I'll see you again next time.